Like the front of the plane.
Brian Wolff will go anywhere or do anything to get a picture. He's perched 30 feet in the air, carefully orchestrating each photographic element to illustrate the beauty of a DC-10 in the fog. Whether it's a massive plane or a tiny bug, photographers combine artistic inspiration and science to share with us their vision of the world.
This week on Innovation, we are visiting the headquarters of the National Geographic Society in Washington, D.C., which is appropriate for a program about the science and art of photography. The field has come a long way since the first fuzzy picture was printed in 1839. Then the effort was simply to capture what we can see. But sophisticated electronic cameras, lights, and films now allow photographers to capture images even the human eye can miss. But the basic task of the photographer hasn't changed. He must not only have a firm vision of what the picture will be, but a solid grasp of the scientific principles to capture it on film. Our report begins with a profile of a photographer who combines old and new photographic techniques and hard work to illustrate our technological world.
It's barely dawn on a frigid January morning at Newark Airport, and photographer Brian Wolff is planning his first shot. He is bringing his expertise as a science and aviation photographer to capture a behind-the-scenes glimpse
That strobe light go off?
of a very busy airport.
Everything I do is planned in advance. It's very well planned in advance. And I think about the photograph 10 times over. A lot of times that particular photograph won't happen. But I do see the photograph before I take the picture.
The day's first assignment to convey the readiness and professionalism of the airport firefighters. Brian pays particular attention to the subtleties of the early morning light. Strobe lights, set up by assistant Kevin and wife Judy, freeze the action to highlight each element of the photograph.
Back up a foot.
The problem with doing a shot like this is getting the guy in here lit as well. Bring up the exposure equal to the outside. You put a small strobe light, we hide it in here.
Can you see the strobe? Is it hidden now? Okay, good.
The strobes have special long-lasting batteries that won't freeze, and they are in sync. With the wink of one strobe's electronic eye, the others, called slaves, flash. With just a few more touches, Brian is ready to start shooting.
Because the light is so poor today and so gray, I add a warming filter to the skin tones, and the sky tones will look a little bit warmer, and you can actually see it. This is good. This is the shot right here. This is nice. Don't squirt me. Don't squirt me. Okay, Judy, hold your spot. This is beautiful. Okay, both of you look right at me. Waiting for another plane to come. Got him. I'm shooting at 30th now. When I go to a 60th of a second, the sky is going to get darker.
Despite the care Brian took setting up the pictures, he's a little disappointed in the outcome. The sky was just too gray and flat, he says, to achieve the dramatic effect he wanted. The last time Brian photographed firefighters, he was faced with entirely different lighting circumstances.
The yellow light that you see on the fireman up front, the fireman on the right, and it's spilling through to the fireman on the left, I'm talking, all the yellow light from the right side, that is strobe light. That's not the light that's coming from the fire. We wet down the pavement on purpose so we would get the reflection of the fire coming from the background. When we use the strobe lights to fill in, we have to hold them up. Unfortunately, the smoke is billowing out there. Usually the smoke is black, and it can be as hot as 600 degrees. We've melted a few strobe lights by sticking them up in the air on poles. This is a high-speed Ektachrome film put out by Kodak. It's a new film that they market called P800-1600. All of the background light is available light that was shot at a night scene on the street at the Nassau County Fire School.
These pictures were taken at 3200 ASA. The film used is the latest in a series of improvements that lessen the amount of light needed while improving picture quality. Just as Brian occasionally must use special films, he also needs special equipment. For Newark Airport's busy control tower, nothing less than a 360-degree camera would do. As the camera spins, the film moves past the open shutter.
Okay, that was nice. Let's do one more.
Brian takes several rolls of pictures, waiting for the moment when the light and the planes are right. And finally, he gets the picture he wants.
I see one. He's getting ready to take off. Here he comes. Let's try and pan with him. There he goes. There he goes now.
Yeah, I told him already.
This is 1916. Straight ahead contact.
And while our camera caught the tower as a casual visitor might see it, Brian had something different in mind. He switched lenses for a very wide-angle exterior of the tower. Sometimes the camera can provide more than just an interesting perspective. It can be an important scientific tool. One recent assignment sent Brian into a NASA plane headed straight for the ground.
This particular project was a stall spin project that NASA has going at the NASA Langley Research Center. And what they basically do is they take a plane up and they stall it until it spins. There's a photographic process that scientists use to see the flow of the air that's going over the wing, and they have a small strip of yarn called a tuff. And as you'll see in the photograph that we took, when the plane stalled, the tufts were going in reverse and upside down and standing straight up, which meant that there was no wind going over the wing.
Brian mounted a camera loaded with 250 exposures onto the plane's wing. Lines inside the wing connected the camera to the switch inside the cockpit. A special switch on the door started the camera going even if the pilot had to jump out. To get the picture he wants, Brian the photographer is frequently Brian the Daredevil. Equipped with a gas mask, he flew with a scientific party into the crater of the Mexican volcano El Chichon after it erupted several years ago.
This is what it looked like inside of El Chichon. That's an acid lake that was almost pure acid, and underneath the acid lake was where the core was forming. And that's what we went in to determine. We went in to take samples, to photograph it, to see what was coming out of El Chichon, why it was coming out.
Capturing this plane in a wind tunnel was also risky business. Brian stood precariously on a ladder with lasers passing within inches of his head.
People have a quest for knowledge, and they want to see behind the scenes. Everybody wants to open up the box and see what's on the inside, but very few people get a chance to open up the box. And for me, the opportunity of being able to go behind the scenes is more exciting than the photograph itself. It fills a personal need to learn something for myself, and then the trade-off is I have to pass that information on, and the way I do it best is photographically.
Back behind the scenes of Newark Airport's busy Federal Express terminal, Brian pulls out all the stops to get his final picture of the day. It takes hours of bone-chilling work to set up a single picture of the giant plane in the dark. Here, the photographer becomes part salesman, part diplomat. He persuades Federal Express to lend him 3 sets of giant floodlights. 2 men volunteer to sit in the cockpit to pose as pilots and to turn on and off the plane's lights on Brian's command.
Yeah, just light the front.
Like an orchestra conductor, he stands up high, calling the signals as he exposes a single frame of film several times to make his picture perfect.
From these fluorescent lights off to my side here, we'll turn the film green. So what we do when we do that exposure, we cover the camera, or cover the lens, with a magenta filter. After that, we shut those lights off. We then go to using strobe light. There's some strobe lights built into the wings. He'll utilize those strobe lights. They're very weak, so we'll have them repeat for a long time. To accent those lights, I'll have an assistant moving around at a very fast rate so he doesn't show up in the photograph. With a very powerful strobe light, he will accent the areas at the end of the wing. We're going to have an exposure in the cockpit. The guy who's going to be running everything in the cockpit is going to also expose himself with a red strobe light. We also then have tungsten lighting, quartz lighting, that's coming out of the bottom of the plane. those particular lights, they're going to turn very yellow. I do not mind them turning yellow. They actually are going to accent the photograph. I will probably let those overexpose so it looks like beams are coming out of the airplane. And that's the photograph.